So, just like my previous video where I nagged like an old woman about the Ebony Warrior's bad character design, this video will demonstrate my love-hate relationship with Skyrim even further. Today's subject, Darkwater Crossing. So, to start off, let's discuss some of the settlement's lore. And we're already confronted with problem number 1. There basically is no lore to be found about the settlement. Maybe you'll catch a single line of dialogue about the settlement from one of its inhabitants, but that's about it lore-wise. Darkwater Crossing is never mentioned in any books, it's never mentioned in any notes, it doesn't even get some flavored text during a loading screen. No, the only way you'll get information about the settlement is by talking to the people living there. Now this wouldn't be a problem normally, but even when speaking to the inhabitants there's barely anything of interest to learn. Maybe you're thinking to yourself, well, people that live outside of the settlement talk about it as well, don't they? Barely. In total, there are 3 people who acknowledge the existence of Darkwater Crossing, but let's not start freaking out yet. Let's go over the information that we get. The first time you can learn something about the settlement is at the very start of the game. Raylov, the Stormcloak soldier that greets you when you wake up, will mention it as the place of an ambush where he was captured. However, this dialogue can only be heard if you escape from Helgen with him and if you care enough to ask him about his capture, so it's not even a guarantee that you will hear this piece of information.
I was assigned to Ulfric's guard. We were on our way to Darkwater Crossing, in the south of Eastmarch. The Imperials were waiting for us. As pretty an ambush as I ever saw. We were outnumbered 5 to 1 at least. Ulfric ordered us to stop fighting. Didn't want us all to die for nothing, I guess. I thought they were taking us south to Cyrodiil. Parade us in front of the Emperor. But then, we stopped in Helgen. And you know the rest.
So what we've learned so far is that apparently Ulfric and a small force of Stormcloaks were headed to Darkwater Crossing for reasons unknown, but got ambushed by Imperials there. Now I'm not gonna break down how completely stupid that whole scenario is right now, that's for a video on the game's intro. For now I just want to focus on one thing, the fact that Stormcloaks were supposed to go to Darkwater Crossing. If Ulfric himself headed out there, then it had to be something serious, right? Well, we'll never know, because no one will ever speak of it again. No one in Darkwater Crossing ever mentions it, no Stormcloaks will ever mention it, and no Imperials ever mention it. It's actually a big plot hole, because, you know, without it the game couldn't take place. Failing to ever address this, if you don't want to say it's a big plot hole, then the least you can say is that it's a wasted opportunity. And with that, I'd like to introduce the wasted opportunity counter. We'll be needing it for this video. The fact that almost no one acknowledges the existence of the settlement, that's one wasted opportunity. Having no one ever mentioned the role it played for the start of the game, that's another one. So we'll start off with 2 points. Problem number 2, the settlement itself. What I mean by that is, there basically isn't a settlement to speak of. In total, we have 1 house and 1 campsite with 4 sleeping bags. There are a whopping 6 people living there, and that's pretty average for Skyrim standards, I guess. Now, the small size isn't my problem with the settlement, I can live with that. My problem is that even with only 6 people, there's still a complete disconnect between them. You can basically split the inhabitants in 2 groups. The people living inside the house and the 4 people living at the campsite. Now, if you have a settlement with only 6 people and it already feels like they're from completely different stories, then you fail pretty hard at creating an immersive experience. Let's actually take a look at the problem, shall we? The inhabitants of the house are up first. They are Werner Rockchucker and Anneke Cragjumper, a married couple of retired adventurers. Anneke will give us one of the only pieces of lore available about the settlement.
That's right. I used to explore all over. I'm the one who originally found the mine Darkwater Crossing was built around.
Although the way she words it makes it sound like Darkwater Crossing is a lot more impressive than it actually is. A settlement built around a mine. Yeah, right. Character-wise, Anneke is an adventurous type who doesn't help her husband with his work as much as he'd like. Werner himself is much more boring, I guess you could say. They've definitely got conflicting interests. Werner is the more mature one of the two. He has left the adventuring life behind and just wants to work in order to put food on the table. But Anneke still wants to explore new places and keep on adventuring. She doesn't seem to be ready to settle down yet. That's basically the depth of their character. Werner talks about work and how his wife should help him more, while Anneke only talks about exploring and how she misses the company of her husband. In all of their dialogue, even dialogue with each other, they still express love towards the other one, and how they should partake in the other's interest more often. This would all be fine if not for one thing. Anakin never sets foot outside of the settlement. In fact, she spends a big portion of her day working in the mine, and when not working, she just hangs around town. So let's hear it for the wasted opportunity counter. Now, I know that Skyrim isn't known for its complex AI, certainly not for the people living in minor settlements, but come on, you can't have someone's entire character be that they are always out exploring just to have them always be in town or at work in the mines. That just doesn't work. Not only does it undermine Werner's character, but Anakin's as well. Now, I mentioned how they talk to each other, but not how they interact with the other people living at the settlement, right? Well, you can already guess why that is, right? They don't. Despite being the founders of the settlement, the others never mention them in dialogue, and never speak to them. It's the same thing the other way around. Werner and Anakin never talk about the others living at their settlement, and they never speak to them either. Yes, they technically work in the same mine together, but can you imagine living with only 6 people at the settlement and ignoring basically everyone else living there? Some of you might, but Werner and Anakin don't seem like those kind of people. The fact that neither group acknowledges the other's existence, that's a point for the wasted opportunity counter right there. Speaking of ignoring someone's existence, could you've ever guessed that Werner and Anakin had a daughter, based on the character descriptions that I gave? No? Well, don't worry, because they don't seem to know either. Anakin and Werner never speak about their daughter with each other. As a matter of fact, Anakin never acknowledges her at all. Only Werner has literally 2 sentences to say about her.
It's a shame our daughter couldn't make the journey herself, but at least she still thinks of us. If you wouldn't mind bringing this back to her for us, I'd appreciate it.
And yes, they really are that ironic. At least she still thinks of us. What a joker. Never hinting at the existence of their own daughter who they apparently are close with, that's what I call a wasted opportunity. Oh, also, their daughter Sylvia is one of the 3 people I mentioned at the start of the video that lives outside of the settlement and actually acknowledges the existence of Darkwater Crossing.
Have you ever been to Darkwater Crossing? Terrible name for such a beautiful place.
Now, let's head over to the other side of the settlement, the campsite where the other miners live. Let's first talk about Sondas Drenum, Tormir and her daughter Revna, since they are basically interconnected. And like I said before, they only talk about and to each other. Out of the 3, I guess Sondas is the most interesting character. He's a dark elf that has lived in Skyrim all of his life and doesn't care for his homeland of Morrowind. He's also an experienced miner and he sometimes looks after Revna. That last part doesn't really make much sense, but we'll get to that in a minute. First, let's discuss Tormir's character. She's also kind of interesting, but you'll soon learn that these 3 characters got dealt a pretty bad hand. If you've seen my cut content video, you might know where I'm going with this. Tormir is a pretty young Nord woman, who appears helpful, dislikes soldiers, and has an even bigger dislike for the father of her daughter who didn't stick around to help raise her. That's basically her entire character. Her daughter Revna will reveal something else about her, the fact that she's a Stormcloak supporter. However, this doesn't ever go anywhere, cause 1. Tormir herself never speaks about her allegiance or Ulfric, and 2. She states that she dislikes war and soldiers. Oh, and her only friends are a Dark Elf and an Argonian. Now, I would add this failed character development to the missed opportunity counter, but we're not quite done yet. Let's now look at Sondas, Tormir and Revna together, and we'll finally get the whole picture. The way Bethesda envisioned things, Tormir is a single mother who has a very active daughter. To make ends meet, Tormir works in the local mine and she drops her daughter off with one of her only friends, Sondas Drenum. Now, let me tell you why this doesn't work. Sondas is a miner as well, so Revna stands around watching him work in the same mine as her mother. Originally, Sondas was an innkeeper, so it made sense for him to look after Revna while Tormir worked, seeing as he had to stay put. But with his role changed, this doesn't make any sense. And that little stupidity I can and will add to the wasted opportunities counter. But there's a lot more going on here. Let's listen to a scene between Tormir and her daughter, shall we?
Amarin thinks that we should go there.
I don't want to hear another word about what you're learning from the elf. It's high time you learn to be a Nord, too.
But Mama...
He's a half-decent farmer. Ask him to teach you to farm.
Now, with that out of the way, I'd like to address two more points. The first point is Tormir's implied racism. This is the first and last time she talks negatively about an elf and really seems to think like a Stormcloak. I don't mean this in a bad way, but if she really is a Stormcloak supporter and the developers wanted to get that across, they failed. Consistency is key, people. Oh, and you already know I'm adding that to the wasted opportunities counter this time. The second point is the character of Mayron. And yes, I know I'm retreading old territory here, but still. For those of you that are unaware, Mayron was supposed to be a pretty important character for the settlement, but he doesn't appear in the final game. That conversation between Revna and Tormir isn't even the only time he's mentioned.
Saunders, does Refna ever mention Mirren to you?
She hardly ever mentions anything else.
I'm just worried about what he's teaching her.
I wouldn't worry about that. He's a good elf. I trust him.
You're probably right.
See, we're actually getting some interesting character dynamics here. I'm so proud of you, Skyrim. The inclusion of Mayron's character would have made the whole dynamic between the inhabitants here much more interesting. The whole picture would have been something like this. Tormir, an only mother, who also has some racist tendencies, has her little daughter getting tutored by an elf that she doesn't trust due to the difficult race relations in Skyrim. However, one of her only other friends, who's also an elf, trusts the guy and makes her a bit more comfortable. While this is already much more interesting, that doesn't make this other scene fit in any better.
Thanks for looking after Refna.
Oh, it's no trouble. She's a smart little girl. Might talk your ear off, but she's fun.
Well, I know she thinks the world of you.
Well, I'll try to be a good influence then.
Would it be possible that Tormir dropped Revna off with Sondas and that she still had time to hang with Mayron? I guess so. Energetic little girls are known to get around. Still, a conflicted racist mother that has her daughter taken care of by elves due to an absentee father? Now that sounds a lot more interesting than what we got in the final game, which just boils down to missed opportunities. Keep in mind, due to Mayron, not existing, we can't really be sure if he had bad intentions or not, because, he doesn't have any dialogue, as he doesn't exist. So maybe Tormir was right to question him, maybe she wasn't. We'll never know. Oh, what's that, Tormir? You wanna add another wasted opportunity? Sure, go ahead.
What's your trouble? Dostern telling tales again?
So yeah, one of Tormir's greetings mentions another completely removed character. You can either think that this breaks the immersion, or that it's just a weird oversight. Either way, it goes on the wasted opportunity counter, because Darkwater Crossing needs all the characters it can get. So basically every character that we've discussed so far has been a bust, and one of the most interesting ones isn't even present in the game. Great. Can the last person salvage this? Well, he sure can't. The person I've neglected to mention up to this point is an Argonian man, Durkitis. He's about as important as the settlement as a whole, and gets mentioned a whole 2 times by the others.
Those falls. Dangerous place. Darkithus thought he could find some good fish in the pools. Haven't heard from him in a long while.
Darkithus used to take me diving way down deep in the river. I miss him.
Again, 2 things here. 1, Durkitis is missing. That's fine, I guess. And 2, Revna. You need to choose who your role model is, girl. Is it Mayron? Durkitis? Sondas? Who cares at this point? Now, back to the fact that Durkitis is missing. This actually refers to a small miscellaneous quest. You can find him trapped by Falmer inside of Darkwater Pass. You can talk to him there and he will quickly introduce himself.
Darkithus from Darkwater Crossing. Should have known better than to swim all the way to the falls. Please, get me out of here.
If you rescue him, he'll say this.
Thanks. I'm out.
Once this has been done, Durkitis will return to Darkwater Crossing and the others will no longer say he's missing. In fact, they'll never mention him ever again. Oh, and Durkitis himself? He'll never even acknowledge you rescued him, because once he gets rescued, he doesn't have any more unique dialogue. This means that he won't acknowledge his whole ordeal, but he also never speaks about it with his supposed friends. Damn it, man. You were supposed to be a breath of fresh air, but instead you're the last nail in the coffin for these people. Oh, and a wasted opportunity to boot. It pains me to say this, but yeah, it would seem that every single character here kinda sucks. They either have underdeveloped personalities, personal stories that don't go anywhere, or just walking and talking contradictions. let's suffer some more with the wasted opportunity speed round. Sondus, Tormir and Revna all talk about the war and soldiers, but except for a local guard or two, no soldiers are ever present and no major battle or anything special ever happens near the location. Both Tormir and Sondus reference Darkwater Crossing also being a fishing settlement, but no one has ever seen fishing. This is because fishing in itself is a removed activity from Skyrim, but still. This would have been nice to have some variety. It's also implied by Sondas that Durkitis is the settlement's fisherman, which would have been cool to have seen in a more elaborate fashion. Text that the player doesn't see from Durkitis' quest also implies that he's a fisherman, and that there were to be others, which just makes me sad. More of said text also implies that Durkitis was to live in an actual house, but that isn't really that interesting to me. All of this easily gets 2 wasted opportunity points. And let's mention the last cut content as well, just so we have a complete picture. Like Durkitis, it seems that Tormir and Revna are also at their own house, which would have been better than just a tent, I guess. And the thing I forgot to mention in the actual cut content video, Werner and Anneke don't carry a key to their house. This is because it goes unused as well. Not really wasted opportunities, just thought I should mention them for completeness. The whole plot point of Revna's father never gets resolved. She doesn't even mention the fact that she may be interested in meeting her father, which would have totally fit in her character. Tormir could have talked it out of her, but then she would still mention that. An internal relationship marker between Tormir and Kjeld suggests that he is Revna's father, which would be completely in character for him. And an interesting story to discover, but like most interesting stories in Darkwater Crossing, this one never goes anywhere. Oh, and while we're talking about internal relationship markers, there's one for Anneke and Nurelion as well. This either implies that they knew each other, and this is yet another example of dropped character development, or that she originally gave out the quest that Sondus does in the final game. Oh, right, I haven't mentioned that yet, now have I? Sondus tells you that he's noticed that the miners have a nasty cough and wants you to deliver a message to Quintus Navale at the White Phial in Windhelm. Quintus is the third and final outsider that acknowledges Darkwater Crossing's existence.
Oh dear. Darkwater Crossing needs medicines for its miners.
You probably already saw this coming, but once the quest is completed, no one will ever mention it again. Quintus won't, and Sondus won't. He never even thanks you or asks if you actually delivered the message. And to top it all off, no one will ever even mention coughing or feeling sick from the mine like Sondus originally implicated. So let's add 3 points here. 1 for Anneke's dropped relation with Nurelion, 1 for Sondus' quest never going anywhere, and 1 for the fact that no one even mentions the symptoms he claims people have been complaining about. Now let's end our suffering by talking about the designs of the people of Darkwater Crossing. Because we're in a mining settlement, you'd expect people wearing miners' clothes, right? Well, only 2 of the 6 people wear miners' clothes, and those are the adventurer who apparently doesn't spend much time in the mine, and the settlement's fisherman. They are really yanking my chain here. Sondus wears barkeeper clothes because he originally ran an inn that was removed in the final game, so I can understand that, but they gave him a pickaxe. Was changing his outfit really that hard? Oh, and as a side note, an inn would have been a brilliant idea for Darkwater Crossing. That way the characters have an excuse to, actually interact and acknowledge each other's existence. Oh, and while I can explain Sondus' barkeeper outfit, I can't explain Tormir's shopkeeper outfit. Did she originally have a shop? Who knows? In the final game it looks stupid, that's what I care about. Revna carries a pickaxe, but why? It's implied she doesn't actually work in the mine, so why the pickaxe? Durkitis is just Durkitis. He doesn't really have a character, and I really can't say anything about him. He's not designed any worse than your average base game Argonian, so moving on. Why does Anneke wear miner's clothes? It's implied that she scouts and goes adventuring. Give her a weapon and some light armor if you really want to drive your point home. Or you could program her to actually adventure, but that may be a bit extreme. On another note, look at her in comparison to Werner. She looks very young, and they already have an adult daughter. I find that kinda weird, especially since it doesn't seem like Anneke is the person that's matured enough to actually raise a daughter. Well, I mean, Sylgia seems like a complete afterthought, but still. I don't really have that much to say about Werner himself. He wears normal clothes. If anyone, I'd expect him to wear a miner's outfit, since he's so work-focused. But oh well. Let's just round the counter off nicely. That's the least I can do for you. In a nutshell, Darkwater Crossing is a settlement that shows the absolute worst of Skyrim's design. It has plot points that go nowhere, removed content that seeps into the final game, characters that are implied to do things instead of actually doing them. The settlement feels fake, the characters feel fake, nothing you do feels motivated, and worst of all, everything seems to be set in a pocket universe where nothing from the outside is relevant. It just feels so disconnected from the rest of the region, so artificial, instead of just being integrated naturally like it should. Bethesda knows how to actually create interesting stories and locations, so why didn't this one get the love it deserved? Well, we'll probably never know for sure. I'm UnknownG, your nagging aunt for today, and thank you for listening. I'll see you in the future, and please, stay safe.